Hey everyone, this is Skylar from Weavium, and today we are going to be making a simple light mode, dark mode interface with Fluid, our new layout stack. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is just create a new project in RapidWeaver. We are going to create a stacks page where we can add our Fluid stack, and then we are going to search the library for Fluid. So if you've installed Fluid, you'll see we have all these different stacks here, and we need to drag the main Fluid stack onto our page. So when you first drag the Fluid stack onto the page, you'll notice that inside of it we've got a state manager, and every Fluid stack has one state manager inside of it surrounding all of the content. You don't have to use it, but you can, and it's always there. And we'll talk about state managers later on as we go along through the tutorial. So the first thing that we need to do is create a container. So I'm going to go into the library and grab this container, which is a Fluid container. And basically what the Fluid container is, it's just a box for anything you can imagine. You can use it as a wrapper, a container. You can use it as some sort of border, as a column, as a row, anything like that. So it's basically your main sort of row column stack. And so we'll drag the container into the stack inside of the state manager here. And then you'll notice that the container has all of these different general properties. We've got a name, which is optional. We can give ours a name. For example, we'll say main wrapper. And you'll see that when we give it a name, the optional name, in the settings mode, now we've got this sort of nice title above it so that we can see how things are organized. And as we go down, we've got fill mode, we've got the content, alignment, we've got overflow, we've got mobile, we've got a style section where we've got things like visibility, we can show, hide. We've got font, we've got text, background, opacity, z-index, minimum size, maximum size, margin with custom units, radius, padding, border, shadow, and a lot of other options. You've even got positioning for inline, absolute, and fixed, etc. So we've got all of these nice options with the container. Basically, you can create any sort of layout you can imagine with just this container. So what we're going to do is we're going to give our container a name. We're going to leave the fill to grow, and then we're going to leave the alignment just as it is. We're going to go down to the styles section here, and we're just going to give ours a background, a single color, and why don't we give it a color of, let's see, I've got this sort of nice material color palette. Let's just give it a light gray color like this. And then we'll also, while we're at it, give it a radius of say 10 pixels and a padding of 25 pixels all around. And so if we preview this now in our browser, you'll see it's hard to tell with the background like this, but we've just got this long empty box, right, with the padding on it. So let's go in here. What we really want to do is let's go to our main Fluid stack here. Let's add some margin on the top just for this example. You don't have to do this. And let's set the max width to maybe something like, I'll do 800 pixels in our case. And so now if we go back to our preview and we refresh, you'll see now we've kind of got this nice centered box where we can add our content. This is just for you guys to see. So now we've got our container. Let's go ahead and add in some text. So we'll keep the Fluid search, and instead of a container, this time we're going to grab the Fluid text stack. And the Fluid text stack is useful because you can use it for basically anything. You can use it for titles, you can use it for paragraph content. As you can see, you can use HTML text or Markdown. And we've also, similar to the container, we've got a bunch of styles, general styles, visibility, show hide, opacity, color, font size, style, alignment, margin, etc. So in our case, let's go ahead and we'll leave our color at black. We'll increase the font size. We want this to be our title, so we'll increase the font size to maybe, I don't know, let's say 26 pixels. We want to make it bold because it's a title, and we can leave all of the other options the same. We've also got a fill mode set to shrink, and what shrink means is basically, shrink is for inline text, maybe something like single word or something that's not going to be wrapping on multiple lines. We've also got the grow, which is for something that's going to wrap to multiple lines, or that we want to fill the empty space in our container. We can talk more about that in other tutorials. In this example, let's focus on the light and dark mode. So we've got our title here. Why don't we go ahead and copy this. So I'm just going to copy, paste, Command V. And now we've got another text. We're going to remove the bold. We're going to set the font size back down to something like 15, general font size. We're going to change the color. Instead of being fully black, we're going to set it to black, maybe 50%. That'll be a little bit lighter, better for text. And then we're going to grab some lorem ipsum text. I use a website called Hipster Ipsum. If you go to Hipster Ipsum, you can just click this button and it'll give you a bunch of lorem ipsum text. It's kind of just modern lorem ipsum. More fun, I think. So we'll paste it in. Maybe we will add in a couple of lines like so. And actually, you know what, let's do this. If we just add it in as text, it's just going to be like this. There's not going to be any paragraphs because it's just text, HTML. So instead we'll set it to markdown, and now we'll paste it in. And now, because it's markdown, when we've got this space, it's going to separate these into paragraphs. So let's go ahead and take a look now and see what we've got. Got our main wrapper, a text as a title, and some title text here. So let's preview this in our browser again, and you'll see it's exactly what we've got. Our container, title here, paragraph text. And while we're at it, let's add some margin to the bottom of our text stack. I'm just going to do something like 15 pixels. And with the margin in Fluid, we've basically set it so that every Fluid stack has its own units. You have to enter your own units. And I know this can seem like a pain, but it's actually much more useful because then you can do things like 100%, or you can do things like HTML, CSS calculation functions, like calculate 50 pixels minus 10 pixels. And this will actually work in Fluid. But in our case, we're going to go back to the normal margin. Check it out. That looks a lot better. So we've got our title, paragraph text, our container. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a button that we can use to transform our Fluid from light mode to dark mode. So let's grab this button now from the library, Fluid button. We're going to place it at the top of our container like so. And then you'll see the button, just like all other Fluid stacks, has a bunch of styles. We've got the fill mode, max width, visibility, opacity, colors, background, hover background, font size, radius, padding, margin, border, you name it, we've got it. And there's also a section down here for a button icon if you want to do that. And we will actually do that too in ours. So let's start at the top. We want to leave our button to shrink because we don't want it to fill the whole space of our container. We want it to just be a simple button. We want the background color. In this case, we're going to set it to just black with white text. And same with the hover background, we'll set it to black with white text. Nothing fancy. Maybe we can do it a little bit lighter so that we can tell when we're hovering the button. I like to set the button text to something smaller, like 14. Padding is probably just fine. We want to add some margin to the bottom to separate it from the text below, so let's just do another 15 pixels. And then let's go ahead and add an icon. So if you want to add an icon, you just simply click the button icon to add icon. You could also do hide text if you want, but we're not going to do that. And we've got to choose our icon font and our icon code. So let's go ahead and do that. We've got the material icon library selected, so let's go visit the material icon website. Just material.io/tools/icons. And then when you visit the site, you've got a whole bunch of icons with the codes already here for you. So I'm going to search through this list and try to find something that is like a moon or a star, something that will help indicate a light or a dark mode. Usually in the photo icons is where you find something like this. Let's see. Come on. There we go. This one looks pretty good right here. Brightness 2. So brightness 2. So let's go ahead and type that in the icon code. Brightness_2. And you'll type it in exactly as it is. And you'll see now we've got our dark mode icon. And now let's click in here to change the text, and we'll say dark mode. And that should be it. If we go back to our page, refresh, now we've got this icon for dark mode. And let's see, maybe what we can do is change the icon position to the right and decrease the spacing a little bit, maybe down to like 7 pixels. This is not necessary, but just maybe. Trying to make things look a little better. In fact, I think the icon looked better on the left, so let's go back to that. Okay, this is just fine for this example. So now we've got our button, we've got our text, and we've got our paragraph text here. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add another button. And the reason why is because when we click our dark mode button, we want a light mode button to show. And then when we click the light mode button, we want our dark mode button to show. Back and forth. So we're just going to add both buttons here. So I'm going to Command C, Command V on the button. We'll change the text to light mode. We'll go in here, we'll change this text color, hover and initial to black. We'll change the background color to white and the hover to maybe something a little bit lighter so you can see a difference. And we will leave everything else the same except for this icon down here, which we are going to change. So go back to the material icon. Brightness 5 looks perfect. So we'll just change this 2 to a 5. Now we've got a light mode button. And so we'll go back to our example, take a look, and now we've got two buttons, dark mode, light mode, and our text. And one thing I want you to notice here is that all of our content is being stacked vertically, and that's because our container here, our fluid container, is set to align the content from top to bottom. We can also do left to right, which I'll show you. Now we've got left to right aligned vertically to the top and to the left. If we go back and refresh, it's probably going to look funny, but now all of our content is lined side by side, right? Left to right. I just want to show you guys so you can see how it works. But for now, we'll leave it on top to bottom, refresh the page, have our buttons. And so now the next thing we want to do is we want to hide our light mode button initially, right? We don't want both buttons to be showing all the time. That would be strange. So instead, We'll go into our button general settings, go to the visibility option, and we'll set it to hide. And now if we go back, you'll see only our dark mode button is shown. Okay, so that's the basic setup when it comes to our layout. Now let's talk a little bit about states and transforms when it comes to Fluid. So one thing I want you guys to notice is that at the top of every Fluid stack, you've got this little interesting button here, and I haven't talked about it yet because I wanted to save it until now. But what this button is on every stack is it's the transform button. And basically, if you click on the button, it will add a transform inside of this stack. It'll add a transform that is applied to this stack, right? And you'll see, if we click on the transform, we can go to the settings over here, and you'll see we can give it a name, whatever we want. You can just leave it at the optional, or leave it at the default if you want. And then you can say when the transform is going to be applied. And you'll see that it says apply when state is active state. So you wonder, where is this coming from? Well, these states are coming from the state manager at the top. So you notice we've got active state, and it's initially set to off. So this state is basically a switch in your layout that can be turned on and off. And whenever this is on, any transform that is set to be applied on this state, notice how these are the same, then this transform will be applied. So let's keep looking at this transform. You'll notice that the transform, very similar to the container itself, has a bunch of options: visibility, text, background, opacity, z-index, min size, max size, radius, padding, margin, border, shadow. It's basically got all of the same options as the regular container. The only difference is that these options are only going to be applied when the active state is set to on. So let's go ahead and let's test this out just so you guys can see how it goes. So I want to show you something. Let's try the opacity. So notice above each option you've got a little checkbox, and that's so that you can pick and choose which options you want to apply. So let's check the transform opacity, and then we are going to leave the timing, speed, and delay as it is. Basically, when you check an option, you get these two inputs: one to set the speed of how quickly this option will be, this property will be transformed, and you can also set a delay if you want. But in our case, we're just going to leave those at the defaults, and we'll set this to maybe 0.5, so 50% opacity. Okay, so inside our transform, let's go back and restart. We've got our name, doesn't matter. What really matters is the apply when state. So whenever this active state is on, then we're going to transform the opacity to 50%. And that's it. So now if we go to our state manager and click on our active state, we can turn it on by default. And then we'll go and look at our page, and if I refresh, because the active state is on, you'll see that now our container is 50% opacity. And if I go back and shut it off, then it's going to be the initial style. This is a basic concept behind states and transforms. When it really becomes powerful is when we start adding fluid triggers, which basically say that when we click on something or hover something or scroll or resize a browser, then it's going to trigger this state to be on or off, whatever we choose. And we're actually going to use triggers in our layout soon. But first, let's go ahead and set up these transforms as well as our state. So in our case, we could use active state, but we want to be more specific. So we're going to set our state to dark mode. So again, we're in our state manager, we've clicked on a state, we've gone to the settings panel, and we've set the name to dark mode, which is going to be off by default. Now, in our container, we've already got a transform added, right? So we're going to click back on that transform, and now we're going to change this apply when state to dark mode because we've now changed our state name from active state to dark mode. So notice that these are matching. And instead of changing the opacity in this transform, we're going to uncheck that and we're going to check the background. And in this case, we're going to set the background to a color, and we want the color to be black, right? When dark mode is on, the background should be black. So if I just show you guys really quick again, if I set this to on, the state, and then go back and refresh, our background is going to be black. If I turn the dark mode state off by default, background is going to be normal. So let's go ahead and add our other transforms. So if we go down the list, our dark mode button, we want to add a transform by clicking on the transform button here. Now we'll click on our transform. We'll say apply when the dark mode state is on. And in this case, we're just going to transform the display or visibility. So instead of it being show when the dark mode state is on, we want the dark mode button to hide, right? And we're going to do the same thing with the light mode button, only the opposite. So we'll click the transform button. We'll set to apply on the dark mode state. And in this case, we're going to transform the visibility again, but we're going to leave it at show. So basically when dark mode is on, the light mode button will be shown. That way you can switch back and forth, right? Now we're going to go down to our text. We're going to click on the text transform button here. Again, we're going to set it to dark mode. And in this case, we're just going to transform the text color. So we'll click here to apply the text color, and we're going to set it to white, right? And lastly, same goes for our paragraph text. Click on it. We will go to the top of the transform settings, tell it to apply when the dark mode state is on. We will go to the transform styles, turn on transform color, set it to white, and remember with the paragraph text we had it a little bit lighter than the title, so we'll do the same thing. We'll set it to maybe 50% opacity for the color. And that's it for our layout. Now we've got our state at the top, dark mode, and we've applied all of our custom transforms to our content. We are changing the background of the container. We're using this transform to hide the dark mode button. We're using this one to show the light mode button. This transform is used to change the text color to white, and this one is doing the same thing. So you notice how it works. We basically go to any item in our layout that we want to change or transform. We add a transform and we set the styles and we tell it when to apply. So now if we go back to the top, I'll show you this one more time. Click on the dark mode state, we'll turn it on by default. And if we view our layout, you'll notice, boom, it's exactly how we want it. We've got our container with a background of black. Our dark mode button is hidden, and now our light mode button is shown. Our text title is turned to white, and our paragraph text is turned to white with an opacity of 50%. So we can go back here and we can toggle it off again. We've got the normal, we can toggle it on again. We've got the dark mode, right? So this is great. Now you see how it works. We've got a state, and when the state is turned on, the transforms are applied. When it's turned off, it goes back to its original style. So this is all good, but obviously we can't be changing the state in a settings mode like this, on and off, right? We want our user to be able to trigger the state on and off. And this is when we use the fluid trigger stack. So let's scroll down so we can get into our container. Let's go to the library and we're going to click on this trigger, which is the fluid trigger. And what triggers do is they literally allow your users to change states in your fluid layout. So we'll drag this trigger, we'll drag it to the top of our container. We've got our main wrapper container, and inside of it we've got a trigger. So let's go ahead and take a look at this trigger really quick. If we go to the trigger settings panel, you notice we've got 3 sections: when to trigger, what states to trigger, and a general, which is just for layout options, fill mode, alignment, etc. So let's take a look at the first section, which is when to trigger. And you'll notice that we've got this change on drop down. So when to trigger basically says what interaction do we want to trigger our state in our layout. So you notice we've got a click, we've got a hover, we've got a scroll, and we've got a window resize. And you'd be surprised how powerful these 4 options are. These are basically all of the interactions that users use to interact with your website. In our case, we're going to leave it on click, which basically says, as we can see here, trigger states when this content is clicked. So whatever content you place inside this drop stacks here section, whenever that content is clicked, it's going to change a state in our layout. So how do we set the state? Well, that's when we use the what states to trigger section over here. So if we open this up, you'll see we've got what states to trigger. And I know it might seem overwhelming at first. We've got these 3 sort of sections, but you don't really need to worry about them. Basically, these 3 sections allow you to change states in different ways. We've got a toggle section, an on section, and an off section. The toggle section is used when you want to switch a state to its opposite. So basically, if the state is already turned on, then you want to turn it off. Otherwise, if the state is off, you want to turn it on. That way, when you click this, every time you click it, it's going to switch it to its opposite. And this is the default, this is the main one you'll want to use, the toggle, switching things on and off. There's also these 2 other sections here, as I mentioned, on and just off. This is for turning states on only. Maybe there's a situation where you don't want a state to be switched back and forth, but you just want it to be turned on. Or maybe there's a certain situation in your layout where you want to turn something on, but when that particular thing is on, you want other states to be turned off, right? Or just turned on. So that's what these are for. This one will turn states on only, and this one will turn states off only. So I hope that's not too confusing. Maybe we'll get into that into another tutorial, but in this case we're just going to focus on the toggle because we want to toggle the dark mode state on and off. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to change this active state to dark mode. So now you'll notice in our trigger we've got whenever this content is clicked, we're going to toggle the dark mode state. And if you're still confused as to where the dark mode is coming from, it's coming from our state manager, this dark mode state, right? So when this content is clicked, this dark mode state is going to be toggled on or off, whatever it is not, right? Okay, so now we've got it, but we have nothing inside of our trigger to be clicked. So let's take our buttons and let's just drag them inside of our trigger. So now our buttons are inside of our trigger, and if we view this in a browser, you'll notice that first our dark mode state is set to off, right? So we've got our main layout, and our trigger is wrapped around this button. So if I click this button now, you'll notice, voila, our dark mode state is turned to on, our dark mode button is hidden, our light mode button is shown, our text is transformed to white, and our container background is transformed to black. So we click it again, dark mode is turned off, and everything returns back to normal. Click it again, dark mode is turned to on, all the transforms are applied. So that's the basic concept behind light and dark mode or theme changing with Fluid. And it basically helps you understand the whole concept behind states and transforms and triggers. That's all you really need to know when it comes to Fluid and making transformable layouts. You need to have a state to turn on and off. You need to have transforms on your content that are applied when the state is on, and you just need to have a trigger somewhere that applies the state, or that turns the state on or off. And that's really it. If you want to clean up our layout a little bit more, I'll show you guys a neat little trick. If you click on the trigger and you go to the general section, you've got this nice alignment button. You can push left, right, center. In this case, we're going to push ours to the right. And we'll go back and view it, and now we've got our button over here in the corner with a toggleable light or dark mode. So that's really it. That's all you need to do. You create your layout however you want. You go in, apply your transforms how you want them to be when your dark mode state is turned on. You make a trigger, and then you have a dark mode, light mode for your website. You could even make multiple themes. You could make a dark mode, a light mode, a blue mode, a red mode, anything you want really. So that's fun. It's kind of theme changing with Fluid, and this is just surface level stuff with Fluid. You can actually create all sorts of different layout, transforms, and layout types. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and look forward to the next one. Thanks.